The police lights were flashing red and blue across the glass walls of the dealership. People had stopped walking. Phones were out. Whispers were spreading fast. In front of the showroom stood a Bugatti Chiron Supersport. Midnight black, still warm, still ticking softly as if it had just arrived from another world. And beside it stood a boy no one expected. 24 years old, wearing a plain black hoodie. No watch, no jewelry, no entourage, just calm. A salesman leaned toward another and whispered, "He can't afford that." A man in a tailored suit laughed quietly. Probably a YouTuber, or someone's driver. The manager checked the paperwork again. His hands were shaking. Because the name on the documents was real, the payment was cleared, and the boy standing there was the owner. No loans, no sponsors, no rich parents. Just one name, Ethan Carter. No one in that crowd knew where he came from. They didn't know that 15 years earlier this same boy had been sleeping in a car that didn't even start. Back then, nobody looked at Ethan twice. He grew up on the south side of Detroit, where winter felt longer when you couldn't afford heat, and summers felt louder when anger lived in every street. His world was small, a cracked sidewalk, a tired apartment, and a mother who came home too exhausted to smile. His father was a ghost, not dead, just gone. Ethan stopped asking about him early. Some questions only made life heavier. At 11 years old, Ethan learned how to lie, not to cheat, but to survive. "I already ate," he would say, even when he hadn't. "I'm fine," even when he wasn't. After school, he worked wherever someone would pay him cash, carrying boxes, cleaning floors, pumping gas, watching people drive away in cars worth more than his entire life. One night, while closing the gas station, Ethan heard a sound that didn't belong there, low, smooth, confident. A car rolled past the station lights, silver, sharp, unreal. It wasn't loud like a muscle car. It didn't beg for attention. It owned it. Ethan watched it disappear down the road. He didn't know the name of the car yet, but he knew one thing. That sound didn't come from luck. It came from power. That night, Ethan sat alone in his room, scrolling on a cracked phone, searching until he found it. Bugatti. The price made his chest tighten. Millions of dollars, not dreams, not someday money, real money. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Then he locked the phone. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel small. He felt dangerous. Because something had entered his mind that night. Something poverty hates. A clear, quiet thought. If someone else built this life, then it can be built again. Years later, standing under flashing lights beside a Bugatti, Ethan Carter finally looked at the crowd. The rich men, the doubters, the ones who never noticed boys like him. And he said nothing. He didn't need to. The car had already spoken. Years earlier, before anyone knew his name, Ethan Carter learned a lesson most people never do. Being poor doesn't just take money away. It takes choices. When other kids talked about college tours and summer vacations, Ethan talked about work hours and bus schedules. He learned how to stretch $5 into 2 meals. He learned which streets to avoid at night. He learned how to stay quiet when landlords knocked too hard. But the most important thing he learned was this. Time was his only asset, so he protected it. While others wasted nights scrolling, Ethan studied. Not textbooks, systems. He watched how businesses worked, how money moved, how certain people always seemed to win even when they failed. At 17, he found a used laptop in a pawn shop. The battery barely held a charge. The keyboard was missing keys. But it connected to the internet. That was enough. At night after work, Ethan taught himself everything. Coding, online markets, digital finance, things no one around him understood, things no one cared about, except him. He failed more times than he succeeded, lost money he couldn't afford to lose, worked extra shifts to cover mistakes, slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. There were nights he wanted to quit. Nights he stared at the ceiling and asked himself why he was doing this to himself. And then he would remember the sound, that calm, confident engine, and he would keep going. At 20, Ethan tried to explain his ideas to people. They laughed. You think you're smarter than everyone else? You should be grateful you even have a job. People like us don't get rich. People like us. The same sentence, different city, same meaning. So Ethan stopped talking. He built in silence. Back in the present, the dealership doors opened. The manager cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, the car is ready. Cameras moved closer. Phones rose higher. Ethan walked forward. His hand touched the door handle, cold, solid, real. As he sat inside the Bugatti, the world outside felt smaller. The noise faded. The doubt disappeared. This wasn't about showing off. This was proof. Proof that the rules weren't fixed. Proof that background wasn't destiny. Proof that the invisible could become undeniable. Ethan pressed the start button. The engine came alive. Not loud, not angry, confident. Outside, the crowd went silent. The same men who once ignored boys like him now watched without blinking. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just drove forward. And as the Bugatti rolled out onto the street, one truth became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't the end of his story. This was the moment the world finally noticed it had underestimated the wrong person. The city talked for days. Videos of the Bugatti leaving the dealership spread across social media. Millions of views. Endless comments. Who is he? Where did he come from? Daddy's money. Fake success. Overnight millionaire. Ethan Carter watched none of it. He didn't care. Because the loudest reactions always come from people who did nothing to build what they're judging. Ethan drove the Bugatti home that night, not to a mansion, not to a gated estate, but to a quiet rented house on the edge of the city. He parked it carefully in a small garage and turned off the engine. The silence felt heavy. For a moment, he just sat there. 15 years of hunger, of doubt, of being ignored. And now this. But instead of joy, Ethan felt something else. Pressure. Because buying the Bugatti wasn't the finish line. It was a message, and messages have consequences. The next morning, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, blocked IDs. People who had never cared before suddenly wanted to talk. Investors, journalists, businessmen with polite voices and sharp intentions. One message stood out. Let's talk. I think we can help each other. No name, no company logo, just a location, a high-rise office downtown. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Then he replied with one word. Fine. The office was everything Ethan expected. Glass walls, city views, silence that smelled expensive. A man stood up when Ethan entered, mid-40s. Perfect suit, perfect smile. Ethan Carter, the man said, offering a hand. I'm Daniel Reeves. Ethan shook it. The grip was firm, calculated. I've been watching you, Daniel continued. You don't just buy a Bugatti without understanding money. Ethan didn't answer. Daniel smiled wider. Relax. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to offer opportunity. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were numbers Ethan understood very well. Too well. You built something impressive, Daniel said. But with the right partners, it could become unstoppable. Ethan closed the folder. What do you want? He asked. Daniel leaned back. Control, he said honestly, and profit. Ethan stood up. Then we're done. Daniel's smile didn't disappear. That confidence, he said, comes from being new, careful. The world you've entered doesn't forgive mistakes. Ethan looked at him. I didn't ask for forgiveness, he said. I asked for success. And he walked out. That night, Ethan stood alone in his garage, staring at the Bugatti. For the first time, doubt crept in. Not about himself, about the world around him. Success had changed how people looked at him. But it hadn't changed who they were. Power attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. Ethan knew this chapter of his life would be harder than poverty ever was, because when you're poor, you're ignored. When you rise, you're hunted. Outside, somewhere in the city, Daniel Reeves watched the same viral video again. He paused it on Ethan's face and smiled. "Let's see how long you last," he whispered. "Success doesn't arrive with answers. It arrives with questions." And the first question Ethan Carter faced was simple. Who could he trust? The days after the Bugatti purchase felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just watched. Every meeting felt measured. Every smile felt delayed, like it had to check his net worth before forming. Ethan moved carefully. He changed routines. He avoided patterns. He kept his circle small, very small. The only person he trusted without hesitation was Marcus Hill, an old friend from the neighborhood. Marcus had grown up 2 blocks away, survived the same winters, the same empty refrigerators, the same late-night sirens. Marcus didn't ask questions. He never had. They sat one evening in Ethan's kitchen, cheap takeout on the table, the Bugatti visible through the garage window. Marcus shook his head slowly. "Man," he said, "you know people are scared of you now, right?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Good." Marcus laughed, then grew serious. "You ready for what comes next?" Ethan looked at the car. "I've been ready my whole life." But life has a way of testing confidence. 2 days later, Ethan received a call from the hospital. His mother had collapsed at work. By the time Ethan arrived, she was awake but weak. Tubes, monitors, a small room filled with machines that beeped like reminders. She looked at him and smiled. "You're working too hard," she said. Ethan sat beside her. "I'm almost done," he said. She shook her head gently. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Don't let money make you forget who you are." Ethan swallowed. "I won't," he said. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of the lie. Because money doesn't change you, it reveals you. That night, Ethan got another message. No greeting, no name, just coordinates, and a time. Marcus didn't like it. "Feels wrong," he said. "Too quiet." Ethan looked at his phone. "Quiet is where power hides," he said. The meeting place was an underground parking structure beneath an unfinished building. Concrete, shadows, echoes. A black SUV waited. A door opened. Daniel Reeves stepped out. "This city is full of opportunities," Daniel said calmly, "and traps." Ethan didn't move. "You refused my offer," Daniel continued. "That was brave or stupid." "What do you want?" Ethan asked. Daniel smiled. "To warn you," he said. "You're playing a game you don't understand." Ethan stepped closer. "I understand one thing very clearly," he said. "People like you only show up when they're scared." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Careful," he said. "Power doesn't come from money. It comes from influence." Ethan nodded. "Then you should stop talking to me," he said, "because you're giving me both." Silence. Then Daniel laughed. "Interesting," he said. "We'll talk again." As he walked back to the SUV, he paused. "One more thing," he said. "You don't buy a Bugatti to stay small." The SUV disappeared into the dark. Later that night, Ethan sat alone in the Bugatti, engine off, city lights reflecting across the hood. He finally understood something important. The car wasn't the goal, it was the signal. A signal that he was no longer invisible. And once the world sees you, it never looks away. Money doesn't knock before entering your life. It crashes in. After the Bugatti, Ethan's world sped up. Not in a glamorous way, in a dangerous one. Meetings stacked on meetings, offers wrapped in compliments, threats hidden behind smiles. He stopped sleeping properly. Not because he was excited, because his mind wouldn't slow down. Every number mattered now. Every decision echoed. One wrong move didn't just cost money. It cost control. Ethan built quietly. He expanded what he had started years ago, a digital infrastructure company that most people still didn't understand. Data systems, financial automation, invisible frameworks that powered visible success. The kind of business rich people used every day without knowing who owned it. That was the difference. Old money liked attention. Ethan preferred silence. One afternoon, Marcus walked into Ethan's office holding a tablet. "You see this?" Marcus asked. Ethan glanced up. A headline filled the screen. "Who is Ethan Carter, and why is Wall Street watching him?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "So it starts," he said. Marcus frowned. "You sure you want this?" Ethan leaned back. "I didn't come this far to hide," he said. "I came this far to finish." The first real test came a week later. A sudden audit. Government-level scrutiny. Frozen accounts. Perfectly timed. Daniel Reeves's fingerprints were all over it. Ethan didn't panic. He had planned for this. While others built fast and flashy, Ethan had built deep. Layers of legality. Transparency that could survive sunlight. 3 days later, the freeze lifted. No charges, no violations, only silence. Daniel called that night. "I underestimated you," Daniel admitted. "But this isn't over." Ethan held the phone calmly. "It never is," he replied. That night, Ethan drove the Bugatti alone. No destination, just motion. The city lights blurred past him as memories came back. Cold nights, empty kitchens, being told to stay in his place. He realized something powerful then. The car wasn't about proving he was rich. It was about proving he was free. Free from fear, free from limits, free from the rules written by people who never planned to follow them themselves. Across the city, Daniel Reeves stared at his screen. Graphs were rising. Ethan's influence was growing faster than expected. Too fast. Daniel whispered to himself, "Fine. Let's see how you handle real pressure." Ethan didn't hear that, but he felt it, and he smiled. Because pressure was the one thing he had trained for his entire life. Power doesn't announce itself. It tests you. Ethan felt it the morning his access badge stopped working. No warning, no message, just a quiet denial at the door of his own building. Marcus noticed immediately. "That's not normal," he said. Ethan nodded. "I know." Within an hour, 3 partners backed out of deals they had already signed. By afternoon, a major client delayed payments. By evening, the rumors started moving faster than the truth. He's unstable. His money isn't clean. He rose too fast. Ethan sat alone in his office long after everyone left, staring at the city below. The same city that once ignored him was now watching his every move, waiting for him to fall. This was the real cost of success. Not money, isolation. Marcus broke the silence. "You want me to call someone?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I want them to think I'm alone." Marcus looked at him carefully. "You planning something?" Ethan finally smiled. "I already did." Daniel Reeves made his move 2 days later. A public conference, a polished stage, a subtle accusation wrapped in concern. "We should be careful," Daniel said to the cameras, "when celebrating sudden success without understanding its foundation." The message was clear. Ethan's name trended within minutes. Daniel watched the reaction from his office, confident, relaxed. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Daniel," Ethan said calmly, "you should have checked the foundation more carefully." Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Ethan continued. "Every partner you convinced to turn away from me signed contracts tied to my back-end systems." Silence. "You don't control the surface," Ethan said. "I control what's underneath." Within hours, Daniel's firms began reporting system failures. Delays, errors, losses, nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough to hurt. Daniel slammed his phone onto the desk. "You think this ends well for you?" he shouted to no one. That night, Ethan met Marcus on the roof of his building. The city stretched endlessly below them. You could have destroyed him, Marcus said. Why didn't you? Ethan leaned against the railing. Because this isn't about revenge, he said. It's about position. Marcus nodded slowly. You've changed, he said. Ethan didn't deny it. I had to, he replied. The world doesn't reward who you are. It rewards who you become. Later, alone in his garage, Ethan looked at the Bugatti again. It no longer felt unreal. It felt earned. But something else sat in his chest now. A question. What comes after winning? Because power never stays still. It demands direction. And Ethan knew the next move would decide everything. Across the city, Daniel Reeves poured himself a drink. He wasn't smiling anymore. This isn't over, he whispered. It's just getting interesting. The past doesn't knock. It waits. Ethan realized that on a quiet Sunday morning when his phone buzzed with a number he hadn't seen in years. Unknown contact, but the voice, familiar. Ethan, the man said, it's your father. Time froze. Ethan stood still in the kitchen, the coffee growing cold in his hand. You don't get to say my name, Ethan replied. A pause. I know, the man said, but I need to see you. Ethan laughed once, no humor, no warmth. You needed to see me 15 years ago. The line went silent. Then the man spoke again. I'm sick, he said, and the world finally knows who you are. Ethan ended the call. He didn't shake. He didn't cry. But something deep inside him cracked open. The same day, Daniel Reeves made another move. This one wasn't about business. It was personal. Articles began surfacing about Ethan's childhood, his neighborhood, his mother's struggles, every painful detail dragged into public light. The message was clear. We know where you come from. Ethan watched the screen calmly. They think exposure is weakness, he said to Marcus. Marcus clenched his fists. They crossed a line. Ethan nodded. So did I, he said. Ethan scheduled a private press interview. No spin, no filters, just truth. I didn't grow up with advantages, Ethan said on camera. I grew up with hunger, with absence, with silence. The world listened. And everything I built, he continued, I built because I was tired of being invisible. The reaction was immediate. Support poured in. The story shifted. Daniel watched the interview in disbelief. He had underestimated something money couldn't buy. Authenticity. That evening, Ethan drove alone again. Same city, different weight. At a red light, he looked at his reflection in the Bugatti's window. He barely recognized the boy he used to be, and he wasn't sure if that scared him or freed him. Somewhere else in the city, a hospital room smelled of disinfectant and regret. A man stared at the ceiling, holding a phone that would never ring again. Ethan didn't know yet, but the final test wasn't business. It was legacy. As some choices don't look heavy until you carry them. Ethan sat alone in his office long after midnight. The city outside was quiet, but his mind wasn't. The interview had changed everything. People no longer saw just the money. They saw the story, and stories have power. Marcus stood near the window, arms crossed. You did the right thing, he said. Ethan didn't answer. What? Marcus asked. I don't know who I did it for, Ethan replied. The world or myself. Marcus nodded slowly. That's the price of being honest, he said. You don't control how it's used. The next morning, Ethan received a handwritten letter. No return address, just one sentence. You became everything I was afraid you'd be. Ethan knew who sent it. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. Some doors didn't need to be reopened. Daniel Reeves made one last attempt. A private dinner invitation. Exclusive, expensive. Ethan accepted, not out of curiosity, out of closure. They sat across from each other in silence for a long moment. You won, Daniel finally said. Ethan shook his head. "This was never a game," he replied. Daniel laughed quietly. "It always is," he said, "until you decide what matters more than winning." Ethan stood up. "I already did." He left before dessert. That night, Ethan drove the Bugatti to the same gas station where he once worked. Same lights, same smell of fuel. Different man? He stepped out, looked around, and smiled. Not with pride, with peace. Weeks later, Ethan announced something unexpected. A foundation, focused on education, technology access, and opportunity for kids who were never supposed to make it. People called it smart PR. Ethan didn't correct them, because results don't need explanations. On a quiet evening, Ethan parked the Bugatti and turned off the engine. For the first time, the car felt light, like it had completed its purpose. He walked inside, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. He was no longer running from poverty. He was running toward meaning,